Take a seat. There's refreshments and coffee. Welcome everyone. I want to welcome you to Comics, Culture, and Society, which is being held at UIC in partnership with the Asian American Resource and Cultural Center and also our Arab American Cultural Center, and hosted in our lovely African American Cultural Center. Just a quick update, Jevity Valentine is not joining us today due to personal reasons, so we still have three amazing speakers today. But you know, people always ask, why are you hosting an event when it comes to, that involves comic books? Well, as a comic geek and a comic collector for years, I wanted to show that comics is a medium for education and social change. It's very relevant to today's social and political climate, and also, as you'll hear from a lot of our speakers today, and most importantly, it's no longer the funny papers for kids, right? It's a medium that is not just about escape or entertainment, but it also tells the histories, narratives, and culture and society. So today you will experience three individuals. They'll have specific expertise on their topics. So I thank them for being here, and I thank you for being here. And just before we get started, housekeeping. If you haven't signed in, make sure you do. And then if you need the bathroom, we have the men and women out here, and then we have gender-neutral bathrooms further down to the right. So feel free to make yourself at home. Feel free to grab refreshments as people speak. Otherwise, I want to introduce our first speaker, Valentino Zullo, who is a PhD student at Kent State University, a licensed social worker in the state of Ohio, and the former Ohio Center for the Book Scholar in Residence at Cleveland Public Library. He holds a Master's of Science in Social Administration from Case Western Reserve University, and a Master of Arts in English and Women's Studies from Bowling Green State University. He is also a student at the Cleveland Psychoanalytic Center, like Munchkin, I can't say that word. Cleveland Psychoanalytic Center, and Valentino believes in literature, social justice, and the superhero way. So, without further ado, Valentino Zullo.
All right, thank you, Mark. All right, I'm just gonna time this because
I'll give you a 5-minute warning.
Okay, I want to have some idea. I don't want to be on like my 10th slide and be 35 minutes in. So I'm gonna have a timer here just so I have an idea of where I am. Okay, so let me see. Let me pull this up. So thank you, Mark, for that wonderful introduction. Okay, so like Mark said, I am a PhD student at Kent. I'm also a social worker, and I'm also training to be a psychoanalyst. And so that definitely has a huge impact upon how I see comics. And so you'll see that because I'm going to talk about psychological identification is what I'm talking about really. So I'm talking a lot about identification, and that really comes from my work in my clinical experience being a social worker, being a psychoanalyst and training. I guess just one of the things that I always say ahead of time. I should ask this before I even say this. How many of you are fans of comics already? Okay. All right. So most of you know. Okay. So not like movies, right? You're like comics. Okay. Good. All right. Because so often it's like, well, I know Phil Jimenez came. He's a big WonderWoman writer. He's done a bunch of stuff. WonderWoman writer, artist, and he said he's like, are you fans of WonderWoman the comic or WonderWoman or WonderWoman? So I always have to ask, are you fans of comics, like the physical form, or fans of comics, like in all of its various interpretations? Okay, so one of the things I was going to say quickly though, just in case. So one of the things I will probably say often is I'll say comics is rather than comics are. And that's only because when we speak about comics, we're talking about a hybrid medium. And so we say comics is, it's a plural noun with a singular verb. It's multiple, it's a hybrid, and so it's going to be used in the plural sense always with a singular noun. So that's not incorrect. And the only reason I stress that is because being a PhD in English, I'm not using the language incorrectly. It is actually what you do. And that's attributed to Scott McCloud in Understanding Comics. He said, I'm going to use singular verb with a plural noun. Okay. So to get started, I'm going to talk about female identification in superhero comics. So I call it she's got to be fast, she's got to be strong, and she's got to be a man. The problem of female identification in superhero comics. And you'll see what that means. It's a good academic title. Says a lot, may not exactly tell you what's going on, but it has a colon in it, right? That's all you need in a good academic title. Okay, so in 1941, William Moulton Marston, most of you probably already know this, created WonderWoman. And one of the things he said was, frankly, WonderWoman is psychological propaganda for the new type of woman who I believe should rule the world. And then, to speed up a little bit, and we'll get back to these quotations, Gloria, this is like an epigraph. If this were a paper, these would be the epigraphs. Gloria Steinem said, as a little girl, Wonder Woman was the only female superhero, so she was irresistible. She was literally the only game in town, the only hero that made you feel good about yourself. So I want to come back to Gloria Steinem because her comment is overdetermined. And I'll explain what I mean by overdetermined in a second. So but it makes sense when we talk about the history. Because Wonder Woman was in fact not the only game in town, but it'll tell us a lot about the history of female superheroes. Okay, so I want to go back a year. So how many of you know about DC's Rebirth? Some of you, okay. So I'll give you a brief synopsis of what happened. So in May of 2016, DC Comics did a revamp of the whole DC universe. They were calling it Rebirth, and they wanted to get back to what they called the core concepts of that universe. And so Dan Didio, who's editor-in-chief, says, we also believe, and he's referring to Rebirth here, he says, we also believe in the direct market and the core comics fan. Rebirth is designed to bring back the best of DC's past, embrace the stories we currently love, and move the entire epic universe into the future. We are returning to the essence of the DCU. And so this happened because in 2011, DC created what was called the New 52. They revamped everything. A lot of characters were de-aged, meaning they were like Barbara Gordon, who was looked like to be like almost 30 in her 30s, she was de-aged to 21. They kind of wanted to get it back to that core. So it's a little bit of like, this feels sometimes, as I'll show you, it's a little bit of like make comics great again type of thing. Like, oh, what are our core? Well, we'll see what the core is. Because it's not a good core. So, they want to return because the New 52 was just a mess. It didn't work out. It got rid of a lot of continuity. DC does this every so often because they have such a long continuity, as most superhero comics do. They're always mired by long histories, and so they'll reboot with hopes of changing and fixing everything and streamlining the narrative. So the way that they did this is they focused a lot on the question of legacy in the DC Rebirth. And so this is like the core. This is like the critical scene in the comic. Wally West, who's in yellow, and Barry Allen, who's in red. They're two Flashes. One was Kid Flash, one was the Flash. And so, well, they are Flash and Kid Flash. And so the core concept is Wally West had been erased from existence during the New 52. Okay, so it's a self-conscious erasure. Now the comics are accepting the fact that DC, the company, erased these characters. And so the comic DC Universe Rebirth, was telling a story about the return of Wally West to the main universe. And he is going to all of his friends and family. He goes to all these different people to kind of get their attention to remember him, because he can't come back unless everybody remembers him. And so his wife, his former wife, his friends, nobody remembers him except finally his mentor remembers him. The person that his legacy derives from, Kid Flash derived from the Flash. And so it's in that moment that Barry remembers Wally and says, how could I ever forget you? And in this moment, all of a sudden history becomes central to the entire narrative. And they make this really, and it's even on the very cover of some of the reprints of the comic. It's this history of going back, connecting back to the history, and really focusing on legacy. And that's what I want to focus on. And this becomes really clear in the comic. They focus a lot on legacy. This chapter right here, where this page comes from, is all about legacy. And you have, I forgot I can use a mouse. So you have Robin, obviously identifies with Batman. Green Lantern, the female Green Lantern here, and then Aquaman. Aquaboy here, but he's identifying with Aquaman. And there's also the Atom. You look at the two Atoms, you see the two Flashes. And so the idea of legacy is is key to this narrative, the DC Rebirth. What do I have next? So while all these male heroes pass on legacy, Green Lantern, the Atom, Batman, the Flash, Aquaman, it's all male legacy, and this becomes really clear. Like at the core of it is male legacy. Female characters do not pass on legacy, and so much so, female characters really have this really convoluted history always. In fact, in this comic, keep in mind this is 2016. This is the 75th anniversary of Wonder Woman. DC is supposed to be really focusing on Wonder Woman, and in this comic of their rebirth, to go back to the core of the universe, Wonder Woman doesn't utter a word. She has no words in the entire text. In fact, the only thing that is said about Wonder Woman is that she apparently had a secret twin brother that was like lost. We don't know where the story's going. So, but it makes one thing clear, as in DC Rebirth: women don't have a history, and if they do have a history, it's scary and it's violent, and something bad is going to come from it. Women can't look back. If they look back, they see nothing, or they see death. They see a million things that we'll get into that are horrible. There's a whole concept called women in refrigerators, because women are often raped, murdered, depowered, and it makes it unable for female history, female legacy, passing on of legacy, identification with a female predecessor. Okay, does that all make sense so far? That all good? All right. So I wanted to kind of give that idea, because this was really, it was a really amazing moment, because you're there and you're like, okay, we're going to go back to the core of the DC universe, and you flip through it and you're like, all right, women aren't speaking in here, women don't pass on legacy, and this gets even, so not only is it about women, but obviously it comes from all different identities. I mean, while we will have characters, and this will become clear, and I'll show you, while we'll have characters that continue a legacy that will be of a different race, of a different sexuality, of a different gender, the core legacy holding character, I guess we'll call it that, is never anything but a white male. Okay, so we have plenty. So the reason I stress this is because legacy is core to comics, right? Batman and Robin, the Flashes, there's a million of them. Here's more Flashes. This is like central to comics. Green Lanterns, there's all these Green Lanterns, and always the key character is always the white male that passes on the legacy. So the idea is the entrance into the world for anybody, any young person, is always through the white male, the entrance into the world, into society. And so we have plenty of male-to-male identification, which I showed you with Robin and Batman, the Flashes, Green Lanterns. We also have female-to-male identification, because of course we have plenty of female characters that continue on a legacy. Batgirl, the new Wolverine, for anybody that saw the Logan movie, and Hawkeye. I mean, this is like one of the best images of it. Here she is, looking at her, here Kate Bishop is looking at Hawkeye, looking at Clint Barton, and she's mimicking him. She's recreating. She's going to be him. She's carrying on his legacy, which is great. We want this. It's not that we don't. It's not that women can't identify with men or LGBT characters can't identify with heterosexual men. It's the problem. The problem that we'll see is that it's always the white male passing on the legacy. And so, of course, there are female characters that don't have a history. Someone like Mockingbird, she doesn't carry on a legacy from another character. She just kind of exists. She's just created. She doesn't have superpowers. She's injected with some different serums, but she's not carrying on a legacy from another character. America is another one. She's not carrying on a legacy. She's just there. And we have plenty of these characters. So you have the male characters continuing a legacy, and then you have female characters that continue on a legacy, and then of course you have females that just emerge as male characters do. And so, of course, the question is like, well, there has to be somebody, right? So the problem is that when there are, they exist for such a short time. So Catgirl, they're always lost to history. They'll be created for a very short time, such as this character. She's gone within like 3 or 4 issues. I can't remember. By this, it was like issue 692 or 693 of the Batman series. By 700, she was gone, and we don't remember her. Or legacy will become so complicated. Rachel Gray is a daughter from the future of a woman that had died, and then when she comes to the present, her mother doesn't want to have anything to do with her, and she just says, oh, you can't be the Phoenix. It's always just so complicated. It's never just like, oh, embrace, in the way that Batman definitely embraced Damian Wayne when he first met him and others. Like, we see, there's an allowance for male-to-male relationships, even with the Flash, like it was romantic almost, like how could I ever forget you? It doesn't happen with the female characters. So when they do pass on legacy, if at all, it's usually very complicated, and then Rachel moves on from that. She doesn't continue that. She's taken on so many different names and positions. All right, next one. And then, of course, for anybody that knows comics, Donna Troy, who is the on-again, off-again, sometimes sister, sometimes younger version, sometimes not connected to Wonder Woman. I mean, I don't even know. It's never easy. It's not like Nightwing or Robin or someone like that. And it's okay that we have Nightwing who, moves on from Batman. His individuation is fine. That's not the problem. Because that happens naturally with children. They're going to identify with the parent and they might leave, they'll return. Nightwing does that all the time. It's the fact that the women are never even given a chance to individuate themselves, to separate themselves from another female character. They usually are completely, are just not connected with them or erased from existence and so on. Alright, so now that we got all these characters, this is just fun. It's sad, but even in the comics they begin to address this. So this is a scene from Mockingbird, where where the character of Mockingbird, she's going through and she's like, I tried all these things to become a superhero, like X-rays, and she's like, I wanted to find some magic amulet, and she's like, if I tried all these things, maybe I'd become a hero. And she's like, and she's realized, she said, I was missing one thing. I don't have a Y chromosome. And so she eventually does become a hero, but she says, I can't totally read it, but she says, essentially she gets to the point, she says, you just need balls. That's how you become a hero. So, even the comics are beginning to address this. So, I want to go back to where I was at the beginning. So, the question is, why isn't there identification with female heroes? Are there a lack of them? What's the problem? And so, Gloria Steinem says, this is in 1972, she writes an essay about Wonder Woman. And she says, as a little girl, Wonder Woman was the only female superhero, so she was irresistible. She was literally the only game in town, the only hero that made you feel good about yourself. So, that's all, well, that would be great if it were true. We know Gloria Steinem is 82 years old, and we know that during Gloria Steinem's time, Wonder Woman was in fact not the only game in town. So why does Gloria Steinem believe that, or why is she asserting that? Because there were plenty. Before Wonder Woman, there was Miss Fury. Around the time of Wonder Woman and after, there was the Blonde Phantom, there was Moon Girl, there was Miss America. There were so many. There were probably more female superheroes running around in the 40s, leading their own books, being heroic, than there are now. And so we have this belief now, comics are finally changing, comics are finally growing up, which Mark implied too in his introduction. But comics, it's more that comics were grown up and then became childish almost. And a lot was erased. Because here we have so many of these female heroes, and I only gave 4. I mean, there's tons of them. And of course we had Wonder Woman. And so what was key at the core of this Wonder Woman comic, so if DC really wants to go back to their core narratives, is the mother-daughter love. It was the maternal love that powered Wonder Woman, that gave her power. It was the maternal love. Hippolyta wanted a daughter. She names her Diana, and then Aphrodite gives her power, and she's born. And Wonder Woman is powerful. She's a powerful figure. She holds Steve Trevor. She's a scientist. She's a doctor. She's saving the day. She becomes an ambassador. And these are the early Wonder Woman comics. She was a powerful woman, and at the core is that fact that Wonder Woman's power derives from her mother. It doesn't come from a male character. It comes from her mother. That's where it was her mother's love, and that's a really important thing. That the maternal love is the driving factor in this narrative. But of course, that gets erased. And, we get to post-World War II. We change, the narrative changes. Robert Kanigher comes on to the series. One of the first things he does is Robert Kanigher said, so I can't ask him. But one of the key things here is that flip of this key scene in the first issue, Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman's here holding Steve Trevor. Now Steve Trevor's holding her on the cover. And she went from wearing boots to these little strappy shoes, which I don't know how she's saving the world in lipstick. But so there's this slow erasure. Have any of you watched Agent Carter? The TV show Agent Carter? So Agent Carter does a brilliant job of kind of documenting the erasure that a lot of women experience post-World War II, and they do it through these radio scenes, which are fantastic. She'll be saving the day or doing something, and the radio will be playing, and she's hearing this narrative of on the radio they'll be playing a narrative of her being saved by Captain America, when in fact Agent Carter was the one that was often saving Captain America. They would flip it. And so she would hear this, and she was like, can you just turn that off? She'd ask this, can you just turn this off? So actively, there was a rewriting of her story as she was still active and around. I mean, it was a really amazing way they did this, where the radio shows would rewrite her history as she was standing there, because she couldn't tell her own story. And so it's a lot of what happens after World War II. We begin to erase these female superheroes. In fact, by 1955, Wonder Woman was the only female superhero leading her own book. We went from tons of female heroes that not only led their own books, but often had their own stories in different comics. Phantoma is another one that comes to mind. The Black Cat, not Catwoman, but there's a Black Cat too. There's a lot of these characters, and they slowly fade away, and Wonder Woman being the only one. One of the reasons why Wonder Woman stays, and I wonder, and again, these aren't things we can ask, but one of my assumptions for why Wonder Woman stayed is because if DC doesn't publish Wonder Woman consecutively for at least 6 months, like if there's a period of 6 months where Wonder Woman is not published, they lose the rights to her. That was one of the things Christy Marston told us that. Yeah, so I'm crediting Christy Marston for that information. We'd have to confirm with her to make sure I'm totally right. In case I'm lying, I often say, like, Virginia Woolf lie. She says it in A Room of One's Own. Does everybody know who Virginia Woolf is? Okay. My students don't know who Virginia Woolf is. I know, you look shocked. They don't know who she is sometimes. So, Virginia Woolf says in A Room of One's Own, she says something to the effect of, lies may flow from my mouth, but fiction is more truth than fact. So if I'm stretching that 6-month thing, then because of Woolf, she taught me. So, but the idea is that if it weren't published for a certain period of time, that DC would lose the rights. So I'm curious to know if that's one of the reasons why we also didn't lose Wonder Woman, in addition to all the other female heroes who didn't have contracts like that. So here we are post-war. Okay, and so this was like the nail in the coffin. If it wasn't bad enough that we were in a post-World War America and we're getting into the Red Scare and we're putting women back into the home, we went from Rosie the Riveter to Susie Homemaker. Frederic Wertham in 1954 published a book called Seduction of the Innocent. Now, leading up to Frederic Wertham's book, he also published many articles in magazines. He was an anti-comics crusader, and he really, really advocated for he wouldn't say this, but the erasure of women in comics, because most of his problems with comics originated in women's stories. Meaning that he said, Wonder Woman, she lives on an island with all women, of course she's a lesbian. He refers to her as like a horrific ideal. Like that she scares men and makes women want to be lesbians. It's like horrifying, the stuff that he wrote. He also claimed that Batman and Robin were in a gay relationship. And he went on for a while. A lot of his commentary was on crime comics and horror comics, and which was somewhat right. His interpretations were not wrong. They were just hysterical at times. One of I think it's Jared Gardner, who's a comic scholar in Ohio, he makes a really interesting point that, it wasn't the kids that were scared of the comics. It was the parents. And one of the reasons why that might be, psychologically, is that when the parents looked at these comics, these horrifying images, because remember, this is post-World War II, we didn't have a lot of information of what was going on in the Holocaust yet. We certainly had some, but a lot of it were these Jewish creators that were writing comics, and so they would pull in a lot of imagery that may or may what they imagined was happening in these concentration camps, or what had happened already. And Frederic Wertham is writing about this, not making the Jewish connection so much, but Jared Gardner, I believe, says that when parents looked at it, they saw the world that they created, and they didn't want children to see that. They were complicit in creating a world, and not just the Holocaust and other things that had emerged, but just creating this very violent world that a lot of the parents were complicit in it. So that's his interpretation. But I think it makes sense that it was the parents that would look at it and see, oh my God, I don't want my kids to see this. But the hysterics of it is really that they're looking at the world that they created for their children, that they were complicit in. The one that we often see people complicit in today, not fighting climate change, not being anti-fascist, you know. So we don't, and so these things are going to appear in things like comics. They're going to appear in stuff that children are reading, children are playing, video games, and so forth. All right. So for the sake of time, I love talking to Frederic Wertham. We could do this forever. So like I said, I've trained as a social worker, psychoanalyst. So I love talking about the history of psychiatry and comics. That's like, I love talking about that. But I don't have very much time to talk about that today. I just wanted to kind of show this, as I called it, like a nail in the coffin. It was the end. Like if culturally we were shifting in our representation of women, Wertham really ended the representation of women in comics. And one of the things that had happened after Wertham is the creation of this character named Batwoman. So women really became objects in comics after Batwoman. I mean, after Wertham, and one of the key ones is Batwoman. So obviously, as I said, Wertham claimed that Batman and Robin were in a homosexual relationship. That's his words. We say gay now, but he was a psychiatrist, and so he said homosexual. And so one of the concerns DC had to deal with is the fact that there was this belief that Batman and Robin were together. So they create the character of Batwoman. It's one of their, Kathy Kane is created. She becomes just like a figure for Batman to desire. I mean, we even see it here. It's okay that Robin is looking at Batman, but Batman has to look at Batwoman. You cannot have them looking at each other. It's true though. I mean, it's okay for the little kid to look up to the adult. We don't want the male adult looking back at the little kid, especially in a romantic scene. So he has to have his eyes on a female at all times. Do I have another picture of the comic? I do. Okay. So Batwoman emerges. She's identified with Batman, and within 12 pages, as you can see down here, Batwoman gives up her identity as Batwoman. I won't read this whole thing, though. It's interesting. I'll just get to the end. Her plan is foiled. She's no longer allowed to be Batwoman, and Batman says, "Yes, she gave me the portrait. Now that her career's over, I thought it would be an interesting trophy." And so she becomes an object to be looked at. She's not allowed to be Batwoman anymore. He puts a portrait of her on the wall, and that is her role, is to be looked at. Now, she certainly appears throughout the comics, but not that often, and she just kind of serves this role of like, oh, Batman and Robin are in fact not together, everybody. Batman loves Batwoman. And in fact, I think it's in the 70s that I can't remember if it's late 60s or early 70s, I'm blanking on the year right now, Batwoman is killed off because she's no longer necessary. There was a big scare in the mid-50s, and then she gets written off. Now, there's a fascinating story that I won't get into too much, that I'm not going to talk about, but in 2006, Greg Rucka and J.H. Williams III create a new Batwoman, and so they kind of reverse, it's a correction, it's a repetition with a difference. And so they recreate her, and what's wonderful is, from the beginning of the comic, again, this is something I love, Batwoman's a great character to talk about. From the beginning of the comic, the front page, she's coming at the reader. They reverse everything that had defined this early character. A figure that was looked at, now she comes at you. You open up the page, one of the first things you see is the boot to the face, like her boot. They change her high heels to combat boots. So it's a big reversal of what they do. They rewrite the character, and she's a lesbian. That's important. So as opposed to this homosexual fear, this gay fear of like, oh, we're seducing children. She's openly gay. She is her positions in the comics. She's often controlling the scene, which is great. Sometimes the narrative will be on her cape, and she'll be holding a flashlight, kind of like helping you through the narrative. She takes control of the scenes, the very opposite of what her position was in this comic. But so anyway, now we're in 56 now, and WonderWoman is the only female character leading her own book. Batwoman and other characters are being created just as romantic figures, and we're in the heyday of romance comics. We've gotten rid of, like 1947 is the first romance comic, and by the 50s there's all these romance comics. Young romance, young kids in love, I don't remember, there's all these funny romance comics. And what happens is, though, I mean, it's the same artists that are drawing this, which is funny. Same artists that are doing the superhero comics. So oftentimes, now you'll see the very same positions on the front covers. And so rather than like a villain peering out through the corner, it's usually some female that wants to take the other woman's man. So they're usually, it's the same, they're not, there's a lot of artists that definitely left. Comic industry was, a lot of comics companies closed down, but a lot of the same artists were there, and they're still using the same tropes. So rather than, the Joker, now it was some female character that looks Joker-ish, that's trying to steal a man from another woman. Alright. Let's keep going. Okay. So, Wonder Woman didn't get to survive completely, though. It's not like you're shaking your head. You're like, so it's not like, oh, we got to keep Wonder Woman, and she survived, and she was our only one that got to survive. Even she suffered. So by 1968, this is into the 60s. 1968, Denny O'Neil comes on to Wonder Woman, and he claims that he thought that he was doing what was feminist. Which it wasn't, but it was his vision of what feminism is. He depowers Wonder Woman. He gets rid of her powers. So now we have no female characters leading books, and now we have this depowered Wonder Woman, and she has a I don't know I don't even want to talk about it. It's horrible. This Asian guy that trains her in martial arts. His name is like I Ching. I mean, it's just terrible. It's like one of the worst periods of Wonder Woman. And there are a lot of bad periods of Wonder Woman. The 90s, for one, but this might be worse than the 90s. So, you get this. So there's Wonder Woman gets depowered. And that's all you need to know about this, really. So, of course, then, 1972, Gloria Steinem comes on, and she's like, I want to put Wonder Woman on the front cover of Ms. Magazine, because Wonder Woman is a symbol. She was a symbol for me growing up. She was a symbol for peace and love and empowerment, and showing that women had power. And she says, okay, I'm going to put her on the front cover of the first issue of Ms. Magazine. Well, she learns immediately that Wonder Woman has no powers. So she calls up DC. I love this story. She tells this story in there was a PBS documentary on Wonder Woman. I can't remember the exact title now, but if you look up the PBS documentary, she's interviewed and she tells this story about how in the 70s she's about to put Wonder Woman on the cover, and she calls up DC, and she keeps calling. And the editor at the time calls her back and says, okay, leave me alone, alright? I'll give Wonder Woman her powers back. I'll give her back her invisible jet. I'll give her back her lasso. And I'll even give her an African-American sister. Will you leave me alone? Because she was very much, one of the things, Gloria Steinem was known as one of the visionaries of the feminist movement. She was also always out there with Dorothy Hughes. And that image that you all probably know with Dorothy Hughes and Gloria Steinem with their fists in the air. She was a major proponent of civil rights. She went more towards women's rights and more towards, I guess, what we would now call white feminism, but she definitely advocated for civil rights for a long period of time. And so she puts her on the cover, and she deals with the fact that Wonder Woman is depowered. And she says, how are women going to look at this figure and turn to the comics and say, I want to be like her. She has no powers. She's a model. Are you serious? Okay, so I gotta rush through this now. I get excited by these things. Can I have 10 minutes? Sure. Okay. Okay. So, anyway, we get to the 70s. 77, we get Marvel publishes Ms. Marvel. 78, SpiderWoman. 80, She-Hulk. 81, Dazzler. So there's a push for female heroes. So again, 1940s we have all these female heroes. 1980s we have all these female heroes. So why? What happens that there still is a problem with female identification? Because after Ms. Marvel was published, let's go back a second. After every female hero, something always has to happen. One, Ms. Marvel, who led her own book in 1977. Her book gets canceled. She moves over to the Avengers, and this is one of the most infamous stories, I should say, of all time. Ms. Marvel's son from the future comes back to rape her and impregnate her with himself. Yeah. So women get their own books, and then they get punished for it. So Ms. Marvel, that story I told you happens to her. SpiderWoman, who had her own book, by the end she gets erased from existence. So, rape, the erasure is at the core, and when there are many women in comics, they're like this. This is 1999. There can only be one. There's a new SpiderWoman now, and what's significant is that here's Jessica Drew, the old SpiderWoman, the one that was erased from existence. Here's a new SpiderWoman. She looks a lot like SpiderMan. I'll show you. She's right here. Her name is Maddie Franklin. And she sees Jessica Drew, who has come back from being erased from existence, but she's powerless, like Wonder Woman was at one time. This happens a lot. Women get depowered. Here's another Spider-Woman who took over the mantle. Now she's paralyzed. And so it becomes clear that one of the reasons why the female characters identify with the male characters is because when they look back, there's a history of being depowered, of being paralyzed, of being raped. It's not a great history. And obviously, I mean, that doesn't even say it. I mean, it's a violent history. It's a history of castration and rape and destruction of women's bodies. And so one of the things I wanted to address is too often women are paralyzed in comics. And it's fine to have we're welcome to have representation of disabled bodies in comics, but the fact is that they're almost always women. And they're always women that were superheroes that get depowered. We want representation of different bodies in comics. However, when it's always women that were superheroes that lose their powers, there's a problem, because Batman will break his back and then he gets better. Another character will lose their powers and then they'll get better. Everybody gets better. If they're male and white, they always get better. If they're female, they don't get better. They get stuck in wheelchairs like Barbara Gordon, unless we do a revamp of the whole timeline. But Batman, within a short time, can heal. So I wanted to address it before I say. But when she looks back, she's going to see. What time am I? I have 6 minutes. Okay, so when she looks back, what she's seeing is a depowered female and then a paralyzed hero, and so of course she's going to identify with Spider-Man, who has never been erased from existence, who has never been paralyzed, and in fact is thriving. And so she sees those colors and she wants to be him. And this happens a lot in the superhero comics. Okay. This was just a narrative of the erasure of Wonder Woman, I was going to say. So not only did Wonder Woman's narrative get changed once, it got changed many times, but then one of the last things that gets erased in the 2000s was that the last thing that was left is that Wonder Woman was, still the daughter of Hippolyta alone. And in the 2000s, they erased that, and Wonder Woman is now the daughter of Zeus and Hippolyta. So the great lie at the core of the Wonder Woman comic is that Hippolyta could not have been the person that endowed power onto Wonder Woman. It had to come from Zeus. So step by step, we get this erasure where power always has to come from men in comics. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So that isn't always true, though. Some people have worked to kind of redefine that. One of them being Genevieve Valentine, who unfortunately couldn't make it, but her work is amazing. And the way that some of these comics artists do this is they don't turn within comics, they turn outside of comics. And so the way she does it is she goes to women's history, and so she, on the surface of the page, inscribes the letters of Elizabeth I. And so Catwoman, Selena Kyle, will think through the letters of Elizabeth I, which is a great moment where she says, if Elizabeth could do this, then I can do it. If Elizabeth could raise a country, I can raise a city. And she addresses the fact that Elizabeth didn't have anyone to look back to. That Elizabeth had to turn to Machiavelli, return to the writings of Machiavelli, because there wasn't a feminist history. Certainly there had been women historically, but as in comics, women's histories are often erased. But so one of the things that she does here, she says, okay, I can go to Elizabeth because scholars and archivists have now made it possible that I can turn to Elizabeth. And so she goes to history. I'm rushing through all this. And so, of course, one of our great examples, which I was supposed to spend more time on, is Kamala, who is Miss Marvel. And one of the things that she does is her identification with Carol Danvers, and she takes over the legacy. This is one of our only examples of female legacy being passed on that's not very complicated in the Donna Troy, Rachel Gray type way that I was showing earlier. She sees Miss Marvel as this internal image, this empowering image. I'm going to just scroll through this. We can talk about this during Q&A, hopefully. And she doesn't just take it on completely, though. She does kind of think through it. And this is one of my favorite scenes in the comic. She changes into the former Miss Marvel, Carol Danvers, and she realizes that she doesn't want everything about her. She doesn't want the blonde hair, she doesn't want the bathing suit, she doesn't want the boots, she doesn't want everything about her. She wants to keep parts of herself. And she says, this is a great scene where she says, the hair gets in my eyes, the costume's giving me a wedgie, the boots slip. So she's dealing with this, with kind of merging merging the identities. She gets the power from Carol Danvers, the previous Miss Marvel, who's now Captain Marvel, but also kind of negotiates a space between. Her costume. Let me go back to her costume. Brings together aspects of her own culture. She's wearing a burkini, but then she also takes the lightning bolt from Carol Danvers. But what's also great is that G. Willow Wilson, who does this series, also turns to history, and this is a great image where Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan, is looking at Carol Danvers, who's in the image of Rosie the Riveter, and so finally we're having some identification with female history both within comics and outside of comics. We'll talk about this more. I know Mark wants to end. But so what's great is that it's not just this identification solely with this white female predecessor, but she's also she finds her way into the outside world without losing her own internal world, without losing her own culture. One of the great scenes is with her mother, and she says to her mother, they think the world's going to end. It doesn't. It ends and then it doesn't end. It's a comics thing. So, but it's a great scene where she says to her mother, she's like, I'm Miss Marvel, and her mother says, I know. She's like, of course I know this. And so she is able to derive her power, her support, from both within herself, with her mother, and then also externally. So her entrance into the world is through a female, which is great. One of the first times we have a really strong connection to female power outside, but she also doesn't have to leave that behind either. And so she's able to kind of negotiate her internal world. Okay, and then I think here's just an image of love between women that we've rarely seen in comics. And then to end, Marvel isn't ending it there, hopefully. One of their new series called The Wasp is about this character of the Wasp looking for the female geniuses of the Marvel Universe, which is a great idea. But she's going back, she's uncovering lost history in the Marvel Universe. So there is this push to have women identify with one another, to have power being passed on between women. Now, we'll see, hopefully it won't just be another loop. Hopefully it won't be like a 1940s we have all these women, 1970s we have all these women, mid-2010s we have all these women, and hopefully now that we're establishing a history between women, hopefully we won't lose them again, but we'll see. Okay, I'm done.
We have about 7 minutes for questions before we get to our next speaker, so let's open up the floor for questions or comments.
Oh, yeah.
There seems to be a backlash in dealing with female comic book heroes. For example, Wolverine's not going to be a female, SpiderMan's going to be African American. And those characters of that nature, why do you think such a big backlash? Is that in racism and sexism still, or?
Oh, definitely. I mean, that's the easy answer, but I mean, I don't know. Even people, I mean, it has to be racism and sexism. I meet people that are not interested in comics and will tell me things like, oh, well, Thor can't be a female.
Yeah, right.
Like, Odin's son, it says it, it's Odin's son. And I said, well, Odin's son still exists. Like, the other Thor, Odin's son exists. Like, she just takes Jane Foster, spoiler, this is like from, if you haven't read it, picks up the hammer and rewrites it. But even people that aren't interested in comics tell me that, well, that's not possible. Like, I know somebody, he was like getting angry at me that he's like, well, it says Odinson, why can't they change it? Why do they have to change it? He says, why can't they just let it be? And I don't know, I mean, we just have such a problem, we, meaning the culturally we, have such a problem with power that is not coming from white males. I don't know, I mean, that has to be it. I don't know what else it would be, unless anybody else wants to jump in. I mean, but when somebody outside of comics that has never read a Thor comic in their life is so disturbed by the fact that Thor is a female, I mean, that's the only thing I can think of. Yeah.
You could also, when they were just thinking about putting James Bond as an African American or black.
Yeah.
Bruce Limbaugh went to skyrocket.
Oh, yeah. Oh, these people, shoot into
was.
orbit over it. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's, such a problem. And I was like, well, I don't know. I mean, finally we get to see ourselves. You know, we get to see people that aren't just the like. I don't know. None of us. I don't look like Thor. Thor's not, not Iranian. I mean, it's just he's not. I don't know. It's just amazing to me that these people get so upset over it. I don't know. But it has to be sexism. I mean, it's just this ingrained in our culture, this sexism and racism. Because, like I said, like somebody who's never read comics is so bothered by this. It was like, you never cared about Thor. Now you care about Thor? I don't care about Thor. So why is it a problem?
Questions?
Yeah, you have
What do you think about when comics transfer to Marvel as opposed to film, and how they downplay the sexuality of female characters, like Scarlet Witch, in the comics are very objectified, very sexy, and in the movie itself, it's more toned down.
Yeah, I mean, other people have talked about this, like Phil Jimenez talks about it, and others that movies, as we know, are still marketed to 14-year-old boys. And sexuality is scary to 14-year-old boys.
Not sex, sexuality.
Yeah, not sex, but sexuality. And so, it is the fact that for some reason it scares these people and scares boys. And it was the problem with, not a problem, but it's why it took us so long to get to Hidden Figures. Hollywood thought like, oh, there's no way that this could be the one of the best movies of the year and make so much money. Hollywood just often doesn't believe it. So they tone these things down. It's a pervasive though. I mean, Alison Bechdel talks about this as well, the Bechdel test. Women, find me 2 women who talk to one another about something other than a man. And it rarely happens, and we can count on like one hand. I mean, Hidden Figures, not Mockingbird, Hunger Games. There's very few. Frozen, which is also very telling when it's also kids movies, and I don't mean Hunger Games is only a kids movie, but it's also really interesting when it's for younger people, because again, it's like before sexuality enters the picture, women can talk to one another. You had a question before, right? You were raising.
Oh, well, okay, kind of connected to that. Like, have you read that? I think it was Marvel's VP, like his statement blaming diversity for lack of sales.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. I mean.
It's all the women minorities are the reason for the problem with comics.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not the fact that we're
marketing or crossover events.
Oh yeah, no, it's not the rebooting all the time. And I was explaining this to somebody the other day. I'm someone that read all 600 issues of Uncanny X-Men for as long as I can remember. I've been collecting Uncanny X-Men. I was reading as a kid. I read a lot more as a kid. I have from a certain period on that I could afford, all of the issues. And when they started renumbering, I thought, well, this is a good point for me to jump off. Because I'm more likely, because I'm a completionist, as they call us in comics world, to continue buying something I don't like just because I don't want to stop. But when they renumber it, I jump off, and I was like, okay, I don't read X-Men anymore. There was a period that I really didn't like in X-Men, and I decided, all right, this is enough. And I don't know, but I may have continued on hoping for the best and continued reading it because I didn't want this open spot. But I think it's the renumbering, it's the events, and I think like last summer was Civil War 2, and I was like, I'm not reading this. Like, I don't want to read it. And so I just want fun stories that are not connected to anything else. And so a lot of us are going over to Image and other underground comics, which is very sad. I mean, I love like autobiographical comics, for example, and I also love superhero comics. But I find myself going more towards the independent autobiographical stuff because they don't renumber and they don't tell these terrible stories that I don't want to read. So that's the real problem, and Marvel has to acknowledge that. And it's also the price. They cost too much.
And I think in regards to what Jonathan asked and you stated, I think the powers that be are still white male.
They are.
Up in the rank, and I think the only way you can get a lot of female voices and images is to put women behind the scenes or
Well, like Miss Marvel, I mean, Sana Amanat is one of the editors, and of course, Sana Amanat comes in, and we get Miss Marvel, and she was working on a couple other series too, maybe so. I think you put a woman of color behind the scenes, and all of a sudden, all these wonderful books start appearing that are not just repetitions of stories that we've had before.
Another correlation would be, if you look at gaming, gamers,
Yeah.
they get hostile positive feedback and responses from the
absolutely.
It's just amazing.
Yeah.
Fanboys, come on.
I know.
Calm down.
I want to let everybody else go. So.
Oh yeah.
Oh, do you want a question?
Yeah, I wondered if you could recommend any titles that feature female creators or characters that.
Yeah. So Mockingbird by Chelsea Kane is wonderful. So the first one is I can explain. I think it's just called I Can Explain. The second one is called My Feminist Agenda, which is great. Miss Marvel by G. Willow Wilson is wonderful. The Wasp is a great series. I'm trying to think what else I would recommend. Let me think for a second. See, this is the problem with starting things. I have to think back. I was like, okay, what did I like before they restarted a bunch of stuff? I would really go with Catwoman by Genevieve Valentine. I mean, definitely. I know she couldn't make it here, but definitely read her. Keeper of the Castle is the first book, and I don't remember what the second book is called. But Catwoman by Valentine. She also did a Xena Warrior Princess series. She's fantastic. I adore her work.
Thank you, Valentino. We give Valentino a hand.